And welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. Look who's here. It's our friend Frank Figliuzzi, former FBI Assistant Director, currently NBC News National Security Analyst, MSNBC, author of a book we talk about the FBI, but a brand new book coming out May 28th, Long Haul, Hunting the Highway Serial Killers. We'll discuss it more at the end, and I'd love you to come back on after it comes out. We'll talk about the book in great detail to share it. So, Frank, welcome back. Nice to see you, my friend.
Yeah, any time for you, Dean, especially if we're going to talk about my book. Yes.
Yeah, anything. Frank's a transactional friend. So if he's selling something, get the Frank Figliuzzi cologne. Ode to Frank. Ode to Fig.
It's a quid pro quo. That's what we call it.
All right. So I get the interview. That's good. I got to sell merch. I got to come up with some good things. Maybe a short cruise. How about a car ride? Get a car ride with Dean. I'll drive you around.
Yeah, we could do Winnebago across Jersey, something like that.
I like it very much.
Glenn Kirshner and I have sold out our cruise in July.
It's sold out. God bless you guys. That's amazing. Frank, he was on last week, Glenn. We talked about the cruise. That's remarkable. Well, I remember when you announced it last August at the Glenn Kirshner Justice Matters event in DC.
That's right.
And you guys announced it there. So I look forward to the next DC thing. So, all right. So let's talk about some stuff going on here from a national security point of view. And what does your antenna tell us? I'm just curious. Donald Trump, during this trial, again, called on his supporters to show up. He was very unhappy they weren't there. And he's railed, they won't let him come. But they're not showing up. What do you make of that?
It's significant, right? It's what law enforcement and intelligence agencies look for in terms of assessing threat and risk. Can the leader turn out in sufficient numbers enough people to do damage? And to what extent is that an indication that we could or could not have trouble down the road? So on the good news side, look, it's obvious. You don't need to have been in law enforcement for 25 years to say that he's not turning out the crowd. And I think there's a couple of things going on there. Number one, maybe first and foremost, NYPD is a formidable agency to deal with. And people know that. They know that NYPD is no nonsense. And they don't think it's cost effective to travel to New York to do that. Okay, so number one, even though there's designated protest areas, as we know, so the opportunity is there. And it's important to say that because Trump is trying to convince his followers, right, to cover the embarrassment of people not showing up. He's saying, oh, they closed down the streets. They closed down New York. Well, my friend, there's designated protest areas and they're empty. So that's number one. Number two, what does it tell us about his ability to motivate people? Well, the ability to motivate people to even violent action is still very much there. We, as recently as 2 weeks ago, somebody in upstate New York was arrested for threatening the life of judges involved with, including Fani Willis down in Georgia. So it's there, but I actually think that people are watching this trial. Even I flip over occasionally to see if Fox News is really covering it. They are. In their own special way. But the story of Stormy Daniels, for example, getting out on Fox News, I know people, Dean, who never believed the Stormy Daniels story, thought it was completely fabricated. And now they're going, wait a minute, did that happen? And so
it happened.
I think people are saying, I'm gonna hang out for a while and see what happens. I am concerned from a security standpoint if he is jailed for contempt. And you know he's going to milk that for all it's worth. It will be a choice of his. Let's not pull any punches. If he violates the gag order one more time, let's understand that he's doing it by choice, not by accident. And that means that he sees himself as now cornered. The trial's not going well for him, and he needs to become the victim in a big way, and he will cry out, and his minions will cry out for protest and action. So that's something that concerns me in the near term.
It's interesting to see if that happens. I mean, if the judge puts him in for 2 hours in the holding cell, I don't know what happens. I would imagine they send him to Rikers or something. But what does the supporters do? What would you predict? Will they try to attack it's not DOJ, so there's not offices in other places. It's just the New York Manhattan DAs just making threats along those lines, calling the judges' chambers, making threats.
So if, I don't want to get into detail about security planning, but I hope they're all ready, and I'm sure they're already planning for this contingency around security for the judge and his family, particularly, and of course, the prosecutor's staff. They need to understand that the threat level will rise around predominantly, not just the courthouse, but the judge, his family, and the prosecutors, and that additional security, even undisclosed locations, might be necessary if that happens. But that will be a true test to answer your first question. Hey, what does all this mean that protesters aren't turning out? This will be the test. If he gets locked up overnight, even in the lockup in the courthouse, and no one or next to no one turns out or reacts, he's lost his ability to incite crowds.
Do you think the fact that DOJ, while I was very disappointed, been very vocal in the criticism about not moving swiftly on Donald Trump, they did move pretty swiftly everyone else who went in there. And people have seen those stories that people have gotten 4 years, 5 years, 20 years in some cases. Does that play a role in all this?
There absolutely, when I talk to people in law enforcement, they say, who are attached to this matter, they say this is having a chilling effect on militia groups, and particularly talking about assaulting DC, right? So the reason we haven't seen large, masses in DC since January 6th is they are absolutely talking about how afraid they are of being arrested. The consequences are quite real, and they don't want that. That does not mean, however, that militias have stopped organizing. In fact, we can talk about this later. I had a column out yesterday for MSNBC Daily that's actually been trending on X, that the militias are reorganizing in a big way, in numbers not seen since January 6th. But unlikely they'd go to DC, even unlikely New York, but there are softer targets for them to think about.
So let's touch on that, because your article, Far-Right Militias Are Returning to Facebook, and it's looking the other way. Very compelling article. I can understand why it's trending, because I saw it myself at MSNBC.com. What are you seeing?
Yeah, well, I wish I could take credit for this research, but it's coming out of a great piece in Wired magazine that I built on, which is that a private research organization has come out with findings that the numbers that we're seeing on Facebook, particularly banned. Here's the key thing. These militia groups that are back alive and well and organizing and recruiting on Facebook are mostly banned organizations that Facebook previously banned. And it's not that Facebook has said the ban is over. It's worse than that. The ban is still on, and Facebook is not seemingly doing a lot about it. And that tells me, so you asked the question why, which I ask in the article, and a couple of things. One is I believe Facebook is absolutely gun shy over what happened in previous elections. The accusation that the FBI was telling platforms to can the Hunter Biden laptop story, that was all made up, which, by the way, is not true.
Right.
Nobody was saying, well, I don't know. I don't know anybody credible who was saying that the Russian version of the Hunter laptop story, it was all made up. What the FBI told, and what I had been saying, the social media platforms was, look, there's a lot of Russian disinformation around this campaign. You better be careful about who's posting what from Russia. And you better be careful you're not regurgitating Russian propaganda. Even Zuckerberg said that's exactly what the FBI said. They never told us to take anything down. But they're so burned by the congressional hearings over this and the idea that they're in bed with the FBI that I think they've decided, I hope this is wrong, but I think they've decided to go hands off with regard to content moderation in the upcoming election. The other thing is you can't monitor and moderate anything if you don't have the bodies. And Facebook has laid off over 200 people responsible for content moderation. And the Washington Post has reported they're going to do away with their funded board that oversees content moderation. So this is what we call a clue in the investigative business, which is they're done with content moderation, and it's not going to be good for anybody in America.
It's really compelling. People check out MSNBC.com. Far-right militias returning to Facebook. I'm chatting with Frank Figliuzzi, MSNBC national security analyst. So, Frank, getting back to the Trump trial so far, what has been anything stand out for you? There's a lot of stuff there, but I mean, you're a lawyer as well as a former FBI special agent. So, anything jump out to you?
So this is not going to be popular, so I'll come around to some sanity in a minute. But let me put that law school grad hat on right now and my investigator hat on and say that I believe there can well be at least one juror right now. This is far from over. There's a couple of weeks left of the prosecution's case. Then there'll be a defense case. But right now, if they had to go right now, I would think that there's at least one juror who will acquit. Here's why. There's a way around this if you want to think this way, that the evidence that Trump actually had criminal intent, actually said, I know this is illegal. I intend to violate the law. I know all the chapter and verse about the fake accounts and the shell company, and where I know we're avoiding, we're evading laws. And I think so far it's circumstantial, which is fine. In most cases, you don't have a video of the bad guy doing the crime, unless it's a bank robbery, right? Okay, well, so people might say, wait a minute, there's an audio tape of Cohen and Trump discussing this. Yes, and so if I'm the defense attorney, what am I saying about that tape? Yes, my client, Donald Trump, says on the tape, well, let's just pay cash. Just pay cash. And who says, no, we have to set up accounts? It's Michael Cohen. Who's Michael Cohen? His lawyer. So Trump is going to say, I relied on my lawyer. I told him, God darn it, I want to pay cash. Why not pay cash? I'm not doing anything wrong. And Cohen says, no, we have to set up accounts. So, that's where we are right now. And if people are looking for the smoking gun that has Trump on tape saying, I know this is illegal, I want to break the law, how do we do that? I don't think that's going to happen. And I think this is going to be a case of totality of the circumstances, incredible amounts of circumstantial evidence. His statements, for example, in his own words in his books, I always sign my own checks. I always know exactly where the money's going and why. Yes, that's great stuff. But if somebody on that jury wants to say, I don't like it, right now, they are able to say, I'm not there yet.
I think Michael Cohen is very key for that. David Pecker helped a little, saying that it wasn't for his family because they never mentioned family, so they knew it was for the campaign. The timing makes it. Common sense says, oh, you had an affair in 2006. You finally paid the woman off in 2016, 2 weeks before the election. Come on, that common sense. So that was for the timing there. And I think it's a question of Michael Cohen's got a tie that Donald Trump knew what we were doing. He understood why I was doing this. And then it's up to the jury. Do they believe Michael Cohen or not? He's such an important witness in all of this. I know they're trying to sort of verify his story without him because he's got real credibility issues. But look, you were FBI assistant director. They're bad guys are key witnesses against other bad guys all the time, and juries convict based on other bad guys. It's like The Sopranos. It's moral relativity. Okay, that guy's a bad guy, but that guy's even worse. So that guy should go to jail.
Yeah, it's we don't recruit Sunday school teachers as sources or as people who flip on each other. So you're absolutely right. It comes down to who the jury believes more. Yeah.
Trump's not going to testify. Do you think there's any chance he testifies?
I think I would be absolutely shocked if he gets on that witness
stand.
Shouldn't.
There's a law. We're both lawyers. No, don't testify. I'd love him to testify. He should not testify. Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, the impeachment material is. I almost hope he gets on because
me too. I hope he does too.
I'd love to do that cross-examination. There's that tape of him. Speaking of tape, he's on Air Force One, and a reporter asks him about the payments, and I don't know anything about that. Well, of course you do. You signed checks to reimburse, and you put them down as legal expenses. So the impeachment material is all over the place, but I don't think he's getting on the stand. And what he'll say is, my lawyers are, just what he said with Bob Mueller and the special counsel. My lawyers say I can't do it. The judge is against me and silencing me, and it'll be nonsense.
And I'm talking with our friend Frank Figliuzzi. So, Frank, in a case that is really in your bailiwick, it's national security. The Donald Trump classified documents / espionage case should have gone to trial. To remind people, Trump was indicted in July of 2023. The trial could have easily happened a year later, or a year and a month, or a year and 2 months later. But Judge Aileen Cannon, appointed by Donald Trump, and I believe auditioning to be on the U.S. Court of Appeals or Supreme Court if Trump wins, is now postponed indefinitely. I don't think there's a trial date before election by any chance.
So here's the, no, I totally agree with you. Here's the thing. So on the best case scenario, she's in way over her head and has taken an incredibly highly complex national security case and doesn't understand one whit about classified information or procedures, which are called SIPA, by the way. There's a whole process, right, where you try an espionage case and people get to see material and all of that. Okay, so that's the best case scenario. However, then I look at her background, like she was law review, honor graduate. So she's not stupid.
Oh,
and then
former prosecutor.
Yeah, this is not a stupid woman who can't understand procedure. So therefore, I'm left to conclude there's something driving her politically or personally. And yes, I do think she's auditioning for the Supreme Court someday if Trump wins. It's really a no lose for her. She's probably a true believer in the MAGA cause. And, best scenario, I become a Supreme Court justice. Worst scenario, liberals don't like me. Who cares, right? So
lifetime on the bench. She's got to keep for life. You can't get rid of her.
No, right. Get rid of me. So if you look at the detailed legal reasoning as to why she's delaying, it makes no sense. No sense. And this is coming from somebody who oversaw all espionage investigations for the United States government when I was assistant director.
So when you look at this case with Trump, could it have been filed in the DC, that jurisdiction, as opposed to being in Mar-a-Lago in Florida?
Yes. And yes, it could have, because of course, where did the loss occur? Where did the documents come from? Who classifies them? That's all DC. So yes, do I think, here we go again with this, a lot of people are talking about, whether you're talking about Attorney General Garland or others, that, well, even Judge Merchan for some, in some cases, people are bending over backwards for to avoid any appearance that they're going after Trump for some personal reason. And I think Jack Smith, as impressed as I am with him, I think that may have factored in. I'm sure his team discussed best venue. You always discuss best venue. But I also think in his heart, he went, I gotta be careful here. I gotta kind of throw him a bone, and let's do it in his own backyard. And I'm sure his team came to him and goes, and said, do you realize if you do that, you could have Judge Canon? And he somehow decided it was worth the risk to at least, avoid the appearance of getting a jury that doesn't like Trump. And here it has blown up in all of our faces.
And that's the thing, because the DC courts are very familiar with the classified document rule. That's where they do. So this case would have moved much more quickly and would have proceeded the way it should have. The defendant would have gotten due process that he deserves and guaranteed, but the case would have moved on. And I think we'd be having that trial now. And that is a case, it seems very limited defenses, to be blunt. Anything could happen, but the other thing people raise is about the idea of, should Jack Smith make a motion to try to recuse her? And at this point, even if he did, she's the judge that hears it first. And by the time you go through the process, then appealing it and trying to appeal it to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, it does what Trump wants. It just pushes us off beyond the trial, beyond the election anyway. It's
tough. It's a tough argument to get a federal judge recused. It really is. You've got to show some really almost gross misconduct. And the fact that you don't like her delays is probably not going to cut it. Could he stack up a totality of the circumstances case and saying, look, each and every one of her decisions seems to be biased? He could, but there's a high risk he would lose. And the public ramifications of that across America is that this guy just got slapped down trying to get this judge removed.
Yep, I'm chatting with our friend Frank Figliuzzi. Frank, and we're still waiting for the Supreme Court decision in the immunity case. I don't know when that's going to come. I imagine the very last day, as they're leaving town, late June, early July. In your heart, any hope the January 6th case actually gets tried before Election Day, or do you think that's pushed as well?
Yes, I do still maintain hope there. It's quite clear, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, that the Supreme Court did not need this delay. They didn't even need to hear. They didn't need to hear this case. The case is a no-brainer, or should have been, and could have been sent back immediately. We're not even here in this case. Of course, a president doesn't have absolute immunity. Get out of here. Now we're shocked by the questioning that occurred at this hearing, where some justices at least seem to think, well, maybe he's got immunity for what he did. And they will delay. The majority of them want to delay this. There's some other hope here that even if the trial can't start, that Judge Chutkin will be asked by the Supreme Court to hold a hearing and figure out which of the material might be personal documents and which belong to the government. Of course, no classified documents are personal possessions of the president. But if she holds that hearing and wants to get out in the air, open sunshine, all the facts of this case and what Trump did before the election, so people are informed, she can do that through this hearing to decide whether any of the material is personal. We could end up hearing all the facts even without a trial.
And we're just waiting, folks. It's disheartening a little. Not on my show continually, I said to everyone, for those people who want to defeat Donald Trump, don't expect the judges to do it or Jack Smith. It's up to the people to vote and win it. But it is disheartening to watch a Trump-appointed judge apparently protecting him and a GOP Supreme Court, controlled Supreme Court, doing what appears to be delays to help the leader of their party. Even if that's wrong, even if they're not, even if they're just doing it above board, that's what it feels like. So it becomes frustrating. It's interesting you mentioned judges bending off backwards, not to embarrass Trump or whatever. Judge Marchand yesterday, he called up Todd Blanche, Trump's lawyer, and said, let's do this at sidebar. I don't want to embarrass your client. He's making all these noises and cursing. We can hear him. Stop him doing it. And we know that because the transcript said that. I'm like, why? Even Judge Marchand, who Trump attacks every day, who even targeted his own daughter, wants to make sure that Donald Trump is not embarrassed, and said to him on Monday, you're the former president. You could be the future president. I don't want to put you in jail. Just treat him like everybody else. I don't understand why everyone does this. Treat him exactly, no better, no worse, exactly the same.
Let me tell you something. I've sat through many a trial at the state and the federal level, and I've never seen this kind of deference given. In fact, I've seen judges take the heads off of defendants who are acting like this in their courtroom. But I will balance that with saying we've also never had an ex-president / leading candidate for his party at a criminal trial before. And so I sympathize with the judge who's got to appear to be completely objective, must be, and not silencing a candidate, and by the way, there will be appeals. Nobody wants a mistrial, which they're already talking about because of how much Stormy Daniels was allowed to spout out in details. And no judge wants to be the subject of an overturned appeal. So I get it, but I do think that we're coming to a point soon enough where there's going to have to be a decision about yet another violation of the gag order.
Lock him up. I just want everyone there to start chanting. Very last question, because I wanted to get your take on this. Trump last week in an interview with a paper in Wisconsin was asked about committing to the results of the 2024 election. And he said, he conditioned it. He said, well, if everything's honest, I'll gladly accept the results. But then he added, if it's not, you have to fight for the right of the country. And I'm like, I think I've heard this before. So what's your reaction to that?
Dean, if anybody thinks that the Trump side is going to accept a loss, you've got another thing coming. He will not accept. And it is not just him. It is a clear strategy. Look at Tim Scott last Sunday morning, Face the Nation, CBS, Margaret Brennan interview. repeatedly refused to answer the question as to whether he would accept the outcome of the next election. He wouldn't answer. He wouldn't answer. He kept saying, I look forward to Donald Trump winning the election.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a loyalty test now. If you want to be around Trump, you must echo this nonsense of not accepting the results of the election. They will declare it rigged and a fraud. And which again, you know, it'll be interesting again, because some Republicans are bound to win down ticket, right?
Sure.
And what, those people are valid winners, but not the top of the ticket? Something was rigged at the top, but not the bottom?
That's what they'll argue.
Please explain.
It's remarkable. Well, Frank, last thing before we wrap up, I wanted you to tell people a little bit. The book comes out May 28th, Long Haul, Hunting the Highway Serial Killers. We're going to have Frank to come on later in the month, talk about it in more detail, but can you give people a little sense of it? Because I know you can pre-order it right now.
Yeah, you can, and you'll be guaranteed to have it on or about May 28th. Look, it is a true crime account of the FBI's Highway Serial Killings Initiative. It's something that took me over a year to research and investigate. I hit the road over 2,000 miles in a big rig, talked to the top experts in sex trafficking, and talked to sex traffic victims who have survived encounters with long-haul truckers. Here's the deal. The FBI is working an initiative that involves 850 homicides along our nation's highways, almost every single one of them committed by long-haul truckers, and the numbers continue to rise. And I felt compelled to get this story out, not only because people need to hear it, but because there's ways that we can get better at highway safety. But along the way, I dig into three cultures: long-haul trucking, trafficking, and crime analysis. So if any of that appeals to you, that the book's for you.
The book, Long Haul, Hunting the Highway Serial Killers, out May 28th. Frank, great chatting with you. Thanks so much for being on, my friend. I appreciate it.
Anytime, Dean.